Hey guys, GearKid660 here, and right now I'm going to be reviewing the Fujifilm XE3. I consider it the Fujifilm camera for smartphone users. The main reason is because of its touchscreen and Bluetooth capabilities. Some unique features for this particular camera: it is a rangefinder design. Many people consider it as a mini Fujifilm X Pro 2. It is the first Fujifilm camera to utilize Bluetooth, which, little asterisk, is not that great. It has a touchscreen interface similar to the XT20, and also has a joystick, focus joystick, which is typically found in the Fujifilm X Pro 2 and the Fujifilm XT2. It also has a brand new autofocus algorithm. So as of the beginning of when this was filmed, which is November 2017, it should have better autofocus than the current XT2. But the XT2 will be getting a firmware update sometime in November 2017. It is also a lightweight camera, which I will be showing it on the scale right about now. 0.712 pounds. 11.4 ounces, 323 grams. If you want to take account the weight of the XT2 weighs 17.9 ounces, 507 grams. Taking into account the weight of the kit lens 18x55, that is 12.9 ounces, 365 grams. To note on these two particular cameras, they have the aperture rings. For those who don't know, when you want to change aperture on a Fujifilm, instead of putting the camera onto A for Canon aperture value, you just change the aperture rings according to what you need it to be. Now note, since this is the Fujifilm 50-140 2.8 constant, you should be able to see that there's a 2.8 mark right here. Since it's constant, it's not variable, you can be able to change these manually as so, and they have detents. A is for auto aperture. I typically choose mine between 2.8 to 5.6 depending on what I am doing at that particular time. The kit lens has a variable aperture, so that variable aperture is 2.8 to, I believe, to f4, and because of that you have an option where you can go auto, or you have this is the selection for manual auto aperture, for manual aperture selection. Since it is a variable aperture, it does not have the clear markings such as the constant, in which the constant aperture lens does. If the Fujifilm lens that you have does not have aperture rings, you would have to adjust it through the front dials found on both of these cameras. On this section, I'll let you guys take a look at the rear, between the two cameras. Obviously, I stacked this one up since this one is on a tripod clamp, since it is the mid-range zoom, the 50x140. So I tried to raise it up a little bit, so that way they're both you can be able to somehow gauge their sides looking from the back, and they're more or less equal heights. As you can see, the Fujifilm XE3 is a rangefinder design. When you stick it up, if you are right eye dominant, that basically means if you naturally bring the camera up, it goes to your right eye. You can be able to use your left eye to see your surroundings, so you can be able to see what the next shot is going to look like, or compose your next shot accordingly. The XT2 follows a DSLR type of setup, in which the viewfinder is in the middle, and that's how they design those particular cameras. Just note, in my practice of using both cameras, I have a tendency to get used to this particular setup, since my dad has a DSLR, I find myself putting my eye in the middle over here on this rangefinder design. I says, oh, where's the viewfinder? And I says, oh, I'm looking at the stupid drive button, you dummy. So then I have to put my eye over here. So it's something to think about when you have two cameras. Although they're the same system, they have different viewfinder areas. Now, in terms of viewfinder refresh rate, they feel about the same. At least my eyes can't tell. But in terms of switching between the LCD and the EVF, I find that the XT2 is a lot faster compared to the XE3. Keep in mind, this is on boost mode, and this is on high performance mode, which is technically its boost mode. And I don't know if you guys are timing that, but in practical use, this feels so much slower, and it's pretty irritating. Now note, if you keep this camera too close to you, both of these sensors are very sensitive. Let me see if you can see from gauge of my finger how far I have to be there to start the transition between the EVF and the LCD. I find that the XE3 actually seems to have a longer distance away from my finger than the XT2 does. Just keep that in mind. So right now we're going to be reviewing the back. I guess you can be able to pause at any time in this particular video, and you can be able to see the button layout and make all of your you can probably tell yourself, is this ergonomic for me? Now I'm just going to quickly overview some similarities. They both have these rear dials, which are pressable, and they are customizable to whatever you need it to be. They also have a focus joystick for you to quickly choose your focus points. They also have both the Q buttons, the A, E, auto exposure lock, and autofocus lock buttons, and of course playback, but they are all more or less, they're all in different spots. Now taking a look at the back, you can tell that the XT2 was designed to be a much as a manual camera as possible. By manual, I mean there's a lot of dials for you to choose your exposure, your drives, your focus points, your size of focus points, and have all these. It's designed as a physical type of interface. The XE3 is designed as a minimalist type of interface, and one of the most hotly debated issues, or mostly called features, is that the Fujifilm decided to get rid of the directional pad, which has become a staple in the Fujifilm design. It's on the XT2, XT1, the XT10, and the X Pros, and numerous other designs of this of their more or less premium type, not the XA3 type of cameras, but the XEs, they're high-end, typically made in Japan type of cameras. They would have that directional button. This does not, and I believe this is primarily to sell it in a way which distinguishes it away from the XT20. And I viewed this particular camera as a Fujifilm camera for smartphone users. Having said this, the touchscreen interface is not fully implemented, and what I mean by fully implemented, it is not as well thought out as Canon. In my Canon cameras, you have a touchscreen where you can be able to select focus points, and you are also able to you can be able to adjust your menus and your setups via touchscreen. Now, for this particular camera, they have the swipe features to access their functions. Here we will review the touch gestures on the camera, which replaces the directional pad. If you swipe from right to left, you will get the film simulations. If you swipe from left to right, you will get the white balance. If you swipe from top to bottom, you will get the ISO. And if you swipe from bottom to top, you will get the AF modes. Now, as you can see here, it's kind of clunky. The system is kind of clunky compared to a directional pad type of layout, such as on the XT2. I prefer the XT2 setup. As you can see, as I swiped on those, you have these false positives on this particular camera where it changed my focus point instead of following my hand gestures. So what I typically do is I try to set up my my settings in more or less like an XT2 manner, where I assign a button instead of relying on the touch focus screens. So when I hand it to someone, I leave it in the touch focus type of setup. That way, because they know how to use an iPhone, they'll know how to use this camera via touchscreen. So the way I set things up, and you can be able to set things up if you read the manual, in order for me to change my focus point size, I just push this one in, and then I change the focus size directly like I would do on my XT2. As you can see, I tried to make this camera to match the ergonomics of my XT2 as much as possible. And since I have no ISO dial, instead of doing the swipe, which is unreliable, I just press the AEL button, and now I have ISO. This is useful when you are in video mode, because obviously you do not want to swipe while you're recording a video to change your ISO. Okay, in terms of other swipe gestures, if you use the playback function just like a phone, you can be able to zoom in, zoom out. You can also swipe back and forth just like an iPhone. And also, like I mentioned before, be careful when you do that, because anytime you put your finger close, the eye sensor can be able to turn stuff on and off. In terms of flash capabilities, both the XT2 and the XE3 have this small guide number 8, I believe, XE8 flash, EF-X8 flash, which you connect to the top. For the older XE series users, Fujifilm had like a small pop-up flash similar to the Sony A6000 lineup. I would have preferred that particular flash setup better, but I'm assuming because they wanted to keep this as lightweight as possible, they just took it out. Not to mention, having such a small flash is kind of useless on a camera like this. Also, for wireless flash users, I have been using the Nissan system. This is a Nissan wireless flash that I have been using with or at least pairing it with their Nissan speed lights, and they both work for the XE3 and the XT2. Just make sure when you are ordering for the Fujifilm designation when you order the flash units. In terms of side peripherals, you have a 2.5 mic jack, which can be treated as a trigger for your time lapse. You also have an HDMI port, and you also have a USB port, which enables USB charging. Now, taking a look into the Bluetooth. So you can see there's a you go to this part of the menu, connection setting, push in, Bluetooth settings. Then you can do pair one phone, and what kind of ticks me off about this is that you can be able to only pair one phone or one iPad. You can't do multiples. I find myself not liking this particular setup from Fuji, and I know it's one of their selling features. It seems to be rather glitchy and cumbersome. It almost feels it just takes off just one step from transferring photos on my XT2, because it's not using Bluetooth to transfer your images to your phone automatically like Nikon SnapBridge does. What this does is that once you have a Bluetooth connection, and let's say you do an auto image transfer, when you take a picture, it shows a marking telling you it's going to be sending, but then you have to stop what you're doing, open your app, and then do the Wi-Fi transfer. It doesn't do anything automatically. And if you want to see how I don't want to waste everyone's time on how it's set up, but I'll just put a link below on how Fuji Guys website and how they do it. I really wish that they could be able to do an auto image transfer without Wi-Fi or me opening the app. I would rather have it that it just sends it like the Nikon SnapBridge, but from what I understand, Nikon still has issues on their SnapBridge technology or their software. Now, to conclude this video, the pros for this particular camera is that I can be able to use more or less the same exposure techniques that I would use or protocols that I would use on the XT2. Once you're used to manually setting your exposure via exposure compensation, your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO the Fuji way, you kind of don't want to do it any other way. I used to be a can shooter. I no longer want to use the PASM modes. Now that I'm used to this system, the only thing that I wish it had, it was an ISO dial like the XT2, but I set this thing up where I press this button, I can be able to set up the ISO accordingly. So it's not that big of a deal breaker. Some other pros obviously is the touchscreen. Some things that I do not like about this particular touchscreen is that it gets confused sometimes. Like if I want to press here and I wanted to press a focus point and it ended up choosing a film simulation. So it's pretty glitchy. I would have preferred that they kept the directional pad that's typically found on the XT2. That way I can maintain a protocol between how I change my aperture, how I change my settings, and my exposure settings. The ISO I was able to work around, just press this button to change the ISO. But I wish we still had the directional buttons. Now in terms of focusing speed, it's okay via touch button. Oh, probably because I'm too close, that's why it can't focus. But it works fine, and obviously if you hand this camera to a novice shooter, they will know how to use it if they are familiar with how to use an iPhone. Just tap and and it even takes a shot. Some ways it's even easier. Now, in terms of features, the reason I purchased this camera instead of the XT20 is that the XT20 seems to have been neglected by Fuji, where several of their cameras get their updates, such as the XT2 and the X Pro 2. In terms of features, the XT20 was more or less neglected in that many of its firmware updates were just glitch fixes, which was pretty unfortunate because it's a great camera, and I felt that the physical controls plus the touchscreen allowed it, well, although it does not have a focus lever selector, it feels more in tune with the XT2, which I am used to, than this particular camera. And one of those features, which was a deal breaker, and I could not wait because I was going to be working at a job site, I'm a project engineer, is the voice record, in which I can be able to, let's say I have this particular issue right here, all I have to do is press and hold the front dial. The reason this is useful for me is because I have multiple floors on a project, and I can easily get confused. All I have to do is just press and hold that front dial, wait 3 seconds. This picture is about the 3rd floor. Something's blocking my duct, blah 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 blah, and stores. And then once you press down, you can be able to play. This picture is about the 3rd floor. Something's blocking my duct, blah 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 blah. And that way, when I am doing my reports on the job site, I can be able to review it easily without getting confused as to which floor I am on. So unfortunately, this particular feature is still not on the XT20. They probably will add it in later, but it's unfortunate that they didn't add it in sooner, because I would have probably gotten the XT20 had that been the case. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, just let me know below. I'll try my best to answer them. Also, if you can support my channel by either A, subscribing, or if you want to purchase this camera or any of my gear, can you please use the Amazon links found on the bottom? I get a small commission and it helps support the channel, and it will not cost you anything more than what you would typically have a sale on Amazon or any other affiliate links. So anyways, thank you very much, guys. Bye.